In the God Delusion, I made a 7-point scale. 1 is I'm totally confident there is a God. 7 is I'm totally confident there is not a God. 6 is, to all intents and purposes, I'm an atheist. I live my life as though there is no God. But any scientist of any sense will not say that they positively can disprove the existence of anything. I cannot disprove the existence of the Easter Bunny, and so I'm agnostic about the Easter Bunny. It's in the same respect that I'm agnostic about God.
Humanity has always asked one timeless question: does God really exist? From the first spark of fire to the rise of modern science, our ancestors looked to the heavens seeking purpose. Some found it in temples and scriptures, others in telescopes and equations. Today, science has decoded DNA, mapped the brain, and peered back billions of years to the birth of the cosmos. Yet the question remains unanswered. Is there a creator behind it all, or is existence just a cosmic accident? One man who confronted this question head-on is Richard Dawkins, the evolutionary biologist and outspoken atheist who shook the world with his 2006 book, The God Delusion. In it, he argues that belief in God is not only unnecessary, but irrational. He writes, "The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction." Bold words, but are they true? Let's decode Dawkins' logic, the evidence he presents, and what critics say in response, to understand, once and for all, whether God is reality or illusion. Richard Dawkins is not just an author. He's one of the world's leading evolutionary biologists. Born in Kenya in 1941 and educated at Oxford, he rose to prominence with his book The Selfish Gene, 1976, where he introduced the revolutionary idea that genes, not individuals, are the true units of natural selection. Dawkins' style is scientific yet poetic, confident yet controversial. Over decades, he became one of the most recognized voices of the New Atheism movement, a wave of thinkers who challenged religion head-on in the 21st century. He once said, "Faith is the great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence." In The God Delusion, Dawkins applies the same evolutionary lens he used for biology to belief itself. He asks, why do humans believe in gods? Is faith a survival adaptation or a mental byproduct of evolution? To him, religion spreads not because it's true, but because it's useful, emotionally comforting, and culturally contagious. Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion doesn't simply deny God. It dissects the idea of God logically, scientifically, and psychologically. His goal isn't just to prove that God doesn't exist, but to demonstrate that belief itself is unnecessary to explain life, morality, or the universe. Let's dive deeply into Dawkins' 4 central pillars of argument, each designed to dismantle the traditional idea of a divine creator. Dawkins begins by redefining the way we think about God. He treats God as a testable hypothesis, not as an abstract philosophical concept, but as a real, measurable claim about the universe. In his words, the presence or absence of a creative superintelligence is unequivocally a scientific question, even if it is not in practice, or not yet, a decided one. He argues that if God interacts with the physical world, performs miracles, answers prayers, or designs life, then those interactions should leave evidence detectable by science. Yet, according to Dawkins, such evidence is entirely absent. He criticizes religious faith for existing outside the boundaries of evidence, saying, faith is belief in spite of, even perhaps because of, the lack of evidence. Dawkins isn't attacking spirituality itself. He's attacking blind faith that resists questioning. In his view, any claim about reality, including God, should be open to scrutiny, testing, and potential falsification, just like any scientific hypothesis. One of Dawkins' most famous arguments is the ultimate Boeing 747 problem. It's his response to the classic creationist claim that life is too complex to have arisen by chance, that it must have been designed. The argument usually goes like this. Look at the complexity of the eye, the DNA, the brain. These couldn't have evolved by random chance. A watch implies a watchmaker. But Dawkins flips this logic on its head. He says, if the universe's complexity requires a designer, then who designed the designer? A God capable of designing complex life must be even more complex than the life he created. So invoking God as an explanation simply pushes the mystery one step further back. In his words, design is not the only alternative to chance. Natural selection is a better explanation for the illusion of design. To Dawkins, the illusion of design we see in biology, the perfectly adapted wings of a bird, or the human eye, doesn't point to an intelligent mind, but to natural selection, a blind yet powerful process. He compares belief in divine creation to believing a tornado could assemble a Boeing 747 from a junkyard. The probability is absurdly small, but that's exactly how he views the idea of a designed universe, an unnecessarily complicated solution to a mystery nature already solves through evolution. Dawkins' strongest weapon is Darwinian evolution, the process that explains complexity without invoking intention or foresight. He argues that life's diversity doesn't require divine design. It can be explained by cumulative natural selection, a process that gradually refines organisms through countless small random mutations. He calls this process the blind watchmaker, borrowing from his earlier book of the same name, because it creates the appearance of purposeful design, but without any conscious designer. Dawkins writes, "Natural selection is the blind watchmaker, blind because it does not see ahead, does not plan consequences, has no purpose in view. Over billions of years, these random variations, when filtered by survival and reproduction, produce astonishingly complex forms of life. To him, evolution is not a threat to belief, it's a replacement for it. Where religion once said, God made us in his image, Dawkins says, we are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. This view, though deeply unsettling to some, provides a purely materialistic explanation for life's complexity, one that doesn't depend on invisible forces or miracles. Critics argue that Dawkins stretches Darwinism too far, applying it to morality, art, and consciousness. But his point remains. Once we understand evolution, we no longer need God to explain design. Dawkins introduces one of his most influential and controversial ideas, the concept of memes. Just as genes replicate biologically, memes replicate culturally, spreading ideas, symbols, and behaviors from one mind to another. Religion, according to Dawkins, behaves like a viral meme, a self-replicating idea that survives by exploiting our emotional and psychological vulnerabilities. He writes, faith can be a powerful vehicle for transmitting culture, but that does not make what it transmits true. Religious beliefs, he argues, spread not because they're true, but because they're psychologically sticky. They comfort us with hope, promise community, and explain the unknown. A child doesn't choose religion rationally. They inherit it, just like a virus passes from parent to child. To Dawkins, this explains why religious traditions persist across generations, even without evidence. Religion, in this framework, isn't a divine revelation. It's a survival mechanism for ideas. He's not saying all religious ideas are harmful. Some may even promote cooperation or morality. But he warns that memes like blind faith or holy war can cause immense harm when left unchallenged. Finally, Dawkins concludes with his most controversial claim. There is almost certainly no God. Why almost? Because Dawkins admits science can never absolutely disprove God, only show that his existence is extremely improbable. He applies the same reasoning we use for everyday logic. If a hypothesis adds unnecessary complexity and lacks evidence, it's rational to reject it until proven otherwise. He writes, we can't disprove the existence of fairies or unicorns either, but that doesn't mean we must believe in them. To Dawkins, the God hypothesis is like adding an invisible layer of explanation we don't need. Nature, physics, and biology already provide elegant answers. So invoking God, he says, is philosophical redundancy. The God Delusion lays out a powerful case built on logic, probability, and evolutionary theory. Dawkins calls it the God hypothesis. The idea is simple. If God exists and influences the physical world by creating life, performing miracles, or answering prayers, then such actions should leave scientific evidence. But after centuries of inquiry, Dawkins argues, no such evidence has ever been found. Therefore, God is not a necessary explanation, merely a convenient story. He writes, "The presence or absence of a creative superintelligence is unequivocally a scientific question. The improbability of God." Dawkins turns one of religion's oldest arguments, the argument from design, against itself. Believers often claim, the universe is too complex to be an accident. Therefore, it must have a designer. Dawkins counters with the ultimate Boeing 747 argument. He says that invoking a designer only multiplies the problem. If the universe is too complex to exist without a designer, then that designer, who must be even more complex, demands an explanation too. To explain the origin of the universe by invoking a supernatural designer is to explain precisely nothing. Darwin's answer. For Dawkins, Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection removed the need for a divine creator. Over billions of years, random mutations filtered by survival pressures created the illusion of design. What looks like purpose, the wing of a bird, the eye of a human, is in fact a product of natural processes. Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist. In Dawkins' view, evolution explains complexity better than any supernatural explanation ever could. Religion as a meme. Dawkins coined the word meme, an idea that spreads and replicates through culture like a gene through DNA. He argues that religions survive not because they are true, but because they are psychologically contagious. They exploit human emotions, the fear of death, the need for belonging, the comfort of moral order. Faith can be very dangerous, and deliberately to implant it into the vulnerable mind of an innocent child is a grievous wrong. For Dawkins, religion is an ancient echo, a relic of a time when humans didn't yet understand thunder, disease, or stars. Dawkins' arguments ignited controversy not just among the religious, but also among philosophers and scientists who support reason yet disagree with his conclusions. Alistair McGrath, also of Oxford, accused Dawkins of misunderstanding theology. In The Dawkins Delusion, he wrote, "Dawkins seems to think that if you can't measure God with a microscope, he doesn't exist. That's like saying you can't detect love with a telescope. Therefore, love isn't real." Many philosophers argue that Dawkins commits a category mistake, treating God like a scientific object when God, by definition, transcends physical measurement. Thomas Aquinas, centuries before, argued that God is not one object within the universe, but the reason the universe exists at all. Others point out that while science deals with causes, religion deals with purpose, and purpose is not measurable. Even scientists with no religious agenda recognize that science cannot explain everything. As physicist Paul Davies put it, science can explain the laws of the universe, but it cannot explain why there are laws at all. And Nobel laureate Werner Heisenberg, father of quantum mechanics, once said, "The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you." In other words, the deeper we look, the more mysterious reality becomes. Dawkins sees the world through the lens of biology and physics, and within that lens, he's often right. But even the most advanced sciences hit boundaries, points where logic falters and wonder begins. The origin of the universe is one such mystery. The Big Bang describes how the universe expanded, but why did it begin? What caused that first spark of existence? Physicists like Lawrence Krauss suggest the universe came from nothing. But as critics point out, the nothing in physics is not truly nothing. It's a quantum field filled with energy. Fine-tuning is another enigma. The laws of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, nuclear forces, are precisely balanced. Change any one constant by a fraction, and life becomes impossible. Dawkins responds by invoking the multiverse, the idea that countless universes exist with random variations, and we happen to live in one that supports life. But this too is speculation, without direct evidence. Then there's consciousness, the most intimate mystery of all. How does subjective awareness arise from matter? Neuroscientists can map brain activity, but they cannot explain why it feels like something to be alive. Even atheist philosopher Thomas Nagel admits, Consciousness is the most conspicuous obstacle to a comprehensive naturalism. Dawkins attributes consciousness to evolutionary advantage, yet even evolution cannot fully explain why mere survival would require self-awareness and the capacity for beauty, music, or moral choice. Dawkins argues that morality evolved naturally, that altruism and empathy are survival mechanisms. But can evolution alone explain why we feel that killing is wrong, or why love feels sacred? Evolution can explain how moral behavior benefits species, but not why humans risk their lives for strangers, write poetry, or believe in eternal truths. Philosopher C.S. Lewis once wrote, "If the universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning." Dawkins sees religion as dangerous, citing holy wars, extremism, and indoctrination. He's right. Blind faith can be deadly, but blind disbelief can also be dangerous. It can strip life of wonder and moral anchor. Between faith and science lies a middle path, rational spirituality, the recognition that reason and awe can coexist. Even Carl Sagan, a skeptic, said, "Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality." Perhaps God is not an old man in the sky, but the name we give to the ultimate mystery that science still can't touch. As the physicist Max Planck wrote, "Science cannot solve the ultimate mystery of nature. That is because, in the final analysis, we ourselves are part of the mystery we are trying to solve." Oh, does God really exist? Richard Dawkins says, almost certainly not. Yet the very question continues to haunt us, generation after generation. Maybe that's because the idea of God represents something timeless, our quest to understand the infinite. Whether you believe in a creator, in cosmic order, or in human reason, one truth remains. The universe exists. We are conscious, and we can ask why. That, in itself, is miraculous. Dawkins closes his book with these words, "There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms or into one. The grandeur, perhaps, is not in proving or disproving God, but in seeking truth. Maybe God isn't an answer, but the ultimate question, the one that keeps humanity curious, humble, and forever reaching for the stars."
I think that religion should be criticized on intellectual grounds as providing a competitor to the scientific explanation of life and the universe. It's educationally pernicious because it gives the idea that you can evade the responsibility to understand things by postulating some sort of easy explanation. Oh, God did it. I think that's educationally pernicious. And as a scientist and as an educator, I'm most interested in that. If you base medicine on science, you cure people. If you base the design of planes on science, they fly. If you base the design of rockets on science, they reach the moon. It works, bitches.
They called him dangerous, arrogant, godless, a man who tore faith from the hearts of millions. But behind the controversy and outrage stood not a destroyer, but a seeker. Richard Dawkins was not born to hate belief. He was born to question it, to challenge the comfortable illusions that chained human thought for centuries. Born in Nairobi in 1941, he grew up watching a world divided by borders, by dogma, by fear masquerading as faith. And as he looked at life, at the precision of nature, the elegance of evolution, he didn't see divine chaos. He saw pattern, reason, design without a designer. He saw truth, and that was enough. When The Selfish Gene was published in 1976, the world trembled. He dared to say that life's beauty wasn't born of divine intent, but of blind selection, a cold, elegant struggle that gave rise to everything we are. He became both prophet and heretic. Millions found freedom in his words and millions found fury. But Dawkins was no villain of faith. He was a poet of science. His rebellion was not against God, but against the tyranny of ignorance. He gave people permission to wonder without worship, to question without fear. Through hate, through death threats, through decades of ridicule, he stood unbroken, because truth, for him, was sacred. He once said, "We are all lucky to be here, the survivors of the lottery of existence." And that's the heart of his revolution. Gratitude not to gods, but to life itself. He didn't destroy faith. He replaced blind obedience with awe. This is not blasphemy. This is awakening. This is Chronicles of Spirit.